Hello fellow modelers. I prepared for today an interesting test. As you probably already know from your experience, it is very hard to paint white color with a brush, or at least I have difficulties with it. That's why I don't paint it at all lately, but I spray a white surface primer on the parts which I need to paint with white colors, with which you can achieve nice results, but it is not convenient to apply. It makes a lot of mess. You have to go outside, and it is not the most economic way to paint your models. So I bought a few different white paints. 8 of them are modeler ones, and 4 of them are artist paints. I took a plastic sheet which I sprayed with this Tamiya gray surface primer and divided the sheet into 12 different sections with a yellow masking tape and painted a black stripe inside them. And now I'm going to apply each of these paints and compare them to see how good they cover, how well they spread, if there are any brush strokes visible or not after they dry. I have 4 water-based acrylic colors. First of them is this white from Italeri. Second one is Vallejo's model color, gloss white. Third one is Revell Aqua. The next one is from Citadel Layer white. The next 2 are solvent-based acrylics. This one is from Mr.Hobby, Aqueous. The second one is Tamiya's X2 gloss white. The next 2 colors are enamel paints from Revell, flat white and gloss white. And I have 4 artist paints. 3 of them are acrylics and 1 is a fast drying oil paint. These are, as I said, not modeler paints, but I was curious how they behave compared to the modeler paints. The first one is from Amsterdam. It is a middle class acrylic color. The next one is from Liquitex. It's a top quality, expensive artist paint. Third one is Japanese acrylic color from Turner. And the last one is a fast drying Alkyd oil color from Winsor & Newton, which I use for weathering effects. So the first one is going to be Italeri's acrylic paint. I'm going to stir it well. It is quite thick from the tube. First I'm applying it straight from the tube without any thinner. For the second half I add the Vallejo's thinner medium. in approximately 1:1 ratio. I mix it with the paint. And paint the next half to see if there's any difference in terms of flow and how good the paint covers. The next one will be Vallejo's model color. It is quite thick from the tube as well. I changed the brush because I was not satisfied with the previous one. It was leaving quite a lot of brush marks. The third paint is going to be Revell Aqua. The next one and the last pure water-based acrylic color is going to be Layer White from Citadel. So let's look at the results of the 4 water-based acrylic paints. As you can see, there is not much difference between them. They are equally good or equally bad. Probably the Vallejo is a bit more transparent than the other 3, which is a bit of a surprise for me because Vallejo paints are very good, at least I'm very satisfied with them. Another surprise is that these white paints tend to behave better when they are not thinned. They spread out more easily. And probably the least amount of brush strokes has the Revell paint. So let's continue with the next paint, the first solvent based, Mr.Hobby. This paint is a real disappointment. The first coat is almost totally transparent, and as you can see, it even lifts the black paint from the stripe, which was dry for at least 2 days. I am not even going to try this paint with the thinner. Let's see our next candidate, Tamiya X2. This is again a solvent-based acrylic. To thin down this paint, I'm going to use Tamiya's X20A acrylic thinner. The next two paints will be from Revell. They are enamel based paints. These little jars are extremely hard to open. I even managed to break my scissors. To thin them down, I will use an enamel thinner. The first one was the flat white and the second one will be the gloss white. So let's continue with our first artist color. The second artist color will be Liquitex. Next paint, Turner Acrylic. The last one will be a fast drying Alkyd oil paint from Winsor & Newton. To thin it down, I will use white spirit. Okay, so I left the paints to dry for one day. It's time to make a review. As you can see, the four water-based acrylic colors are quite similar. Maybe the Vallejo covers a bit less than the other three. The Revell Aqua has the least amount of brush strokes. And interestingly, these paints are much better when they are not thinned. Let's move to the next two colors, the solvent-based acrylics. Mr.Hobby is totally transparent, it's almost like water. It's a disappointment for the first coat, and as you can see, it even lifted the black paint, which was dry already for 1 or 2 days, which is not the case with Tamiya. Tamiya covers approximately like Citadel, maybe a bit worse. But it spreads out better, it leaves less brush marks. Let's move to the enamels. On the left side there is the matte, and on the right side the gloss one. The matte dries much faster and it retains some of the brush marks, which is not the case with the gloss one. It has more time to spread out. They behave quite good with the thinner as well. Interestingly, these Revell enamel paints do have some yellowish tone. Probably you can see it as well, which I don't like too much, because if I want to paint a white color, then I want it to be white and not sort of yellowish tone. They are not so pure nice whites as the acrylics. The last 4 paints are the artist paints. They cover very nicely. They are better than the modeler ones. Turner almost completely covered the black stripe for the first coat, but the disadvantage of this paint is that they retain the brush marks. They are so-called heavy body paints, which is a desired feature when you are doing paintings, but you don't want to have those brush marks when you are painting model kits. So even though they cover pretty nicely, they are useless for painting models. Liquitex has a soft body acrylics. If that would cover similarly and it would not retain brush strokes, that maybe that would be a good option to modeler paints. Now I'm going to apply a second coat with similar technique and make another review of the results. The second coats are ready and dry. Let's take a look at the results. As you can see, the 4 water-based acrylics look very similar. The black stripe is still visible. There are brush marks visible as well. Vallejo levels out much better with the thinner, but there are some flakes. It's not quite evenly spread. Citadel retains brush marks as well, levels out better with the thinner, and probably Revell Aqua has the least amount of brush marks and it levels out quite okay with the thinner. There are some places where there is more and less paint, but that's my fault. I was not trying to spread the paint evenly. Mr.Hobby is still very transparent, still a disappointment after 2 coats. Tamiya covers pretty similarly as the water-based acrylics, but it probably levels out much better than the other acrylics. It's a very nice finish with its Tamiya X2 X28 thinner. The Revell flat enamel retains brush marks, levels out much nicer with enamel thinner. And the gloss Revell levels out quite nicely even without the thinner, because it has a much longer drying time. The 4 artist paints cover pretty nicely. Turner has completely covered the black stripe after 2 coats, but they all retain brush marks, so they are not suitable for model painting. Now I will make a 3rd coat and come back with the results. The 3rd coat is ready. Let's look at the results. Again, the top 4 water-based acrylics are quite similar. The black stripe is still a little bit visible. Maybe Vallejo covers a bit worse than the other 3. Italeri retains some brush marks. It works better with the thinner, levels out better. Revell Aqua has probably the least amount of brush marks. It levels out very nicely with the thinner. Vallejo retains brush marks too. To my surprise, it doesn't work very good with the thinner, even though it's Vallejo's thinner. Citadel retains brush marks too. It levels out much nicer with the thinner. To my surprise, Mr.Hobby started to work with the third coat. It starts to cover the black stripe. So I will add the fourth coat and try it with the thinner as well. Tamiya X2 looks probably the best among the acrylics. Covers pretty nicely and levels out much nicer than the other acrylics. With its thinner, it's even better. And the two enamels, they cover pretty nicely. After the third coat, the black stripe is completely covered. They level out quite nicely as well. The matte needs enamel thinner to level out better because it dries quite fast, and the gloss one levels out very nicely even without the thinner. But as I said earlier, these Revell enamels have some yellowish tone which I don't like too much. I was not making a third coat from the artist paints. Now I'm going to add the fourth coat for the upper 6 acrylics and look at the results. So the fourth and final coat of the acrylic paints is ready. Let's take a look at the results. First, Italeri. It still retains the brush marks. It levels out better with the thinner, and the black stripe is now completely gone with the fourth coat. Vallejo is very similar, retains the brush marks. It does not work quite as good with the thinner. Revell Aqua is much better. It levels out much nicer. It works very good with the thinner as well, and it covers completely after 4 coats. It's a very nice color to work with. Citadel very similar as Revell Aqua. I like it too. Mr.Hobby started to work after the fourth coat. It covered now completely. Levels out very nicely. It has a nice glossy finish. With the thinner it is still quite transparent, which is not the case with Tamiya. Tamiya covers very nicely even with the thinner. Levels out very nicely, there are almost no brush marks. So my personal favorite from these 6 acrylic colors is the Tamiya. I will definitely try this paint on my next model. Paint some smaller pieces, wheelbase or some similar stuff, and look how it works on plastic. While I was making this video, I bought one more color, the color of all colors, Mr. Color, which is a lacquer based acrylic color. I'm going to add this test and look how it compares to the other acrylics. Well, let's see then our last color, our last paint, Mr. Color, lacquer based acrylic paint. I'm going to thin it down with the Mr. Color's leveling thinner. As you can see, it was not a very good idea to paint this color over the acrylic paint because it lifts it. Completely dissolve the water-based acrylic black stripe. Even without the thinner, it lifted a little bit the black stripe. And so I'm going to try this paint on the next section without the black stripe. We are ready with the Mr. Color. I made 4 coats. On the left side it is without the thinner and on the right side with the thinner. As you can see, this paint retains brush marks. It covered quite okay with this 4th coat, but I wouldn't say it is better than Mr. Hobby's Aqueous color or better Tamiya. These 2 paints level out even more nicely. When it is thinned, it's a bit more transparent and the surface finish is very similar. It retains still some brush marks. And what's even worse, this paint stinks horribly. From my side, the clear winner is Tamiya's X2 and maybe Mr. Hobby's Aqueous color without the thinner. And from the pure acrylics, Revell and Citadel. In this test I will do a scratch test to see how durable these paints are, how good they stick to the surface. Italeri acrylic scratches quite easily with the thinner as well. Vallejo is a bit more harder to scratch and even harder with the thinner. Revell Aqua scratches easily, it's approximately like Italeri, and Citadel the same. Mr.Hobby is much harder to scratch, you have to press much harder. Tamiya's X2 is quite durable too, it's hard to scratch as well. And the enamels are quite durable too, they are hard to scratch. So to summarize it, the acrylic paints do scratch more easily than the enamels or the solvent based or lacquer based acrylics. So guys, I hope you like this test. If you have some other experience with these paints or know some other white paints which are better than those that I tried in this test, then you can let me know in the comment section, and see you next time.